racially, but also other topics. And so we will continue doing that tonight. Um, Before COVID and after Randolph Community College, we would meet at the Benjamin Library in Greensboro. We'd meet at the Benjamin Library in Greensboro. And there we always recognize that we stand on the land of the indigenous people, that is the Saponi people, and that their land was stolen from them. That said, tonight we are here to speak about racial healing and racial injustice as well. We have a guest speaker tonight, which is not usual for us. We usually gather to discuss freely about what's in the news, what's on our minds. But at times, since we have moved online, we actually take advantage of this opportunity to invite speakers and experts to share their knowledge and to help us better understand our world and what we can do to make it better. That said, I will pass it on to my co-facilitator, Dr. Chuck Edgerton.
Thank you, Yassine. I so love working with Yassine, and we've been doing this for a long time. Really, Common Threads has been a group that's been going for over 30 years. Started out as discussion group at the college, and now it's evolving, and it's so exciting. I think I remember telling Cherry about it when I first knew her 25 years ago or so, and it's just continuing. I want to let everyone know that I have turned on the recording for tonight, and just I want to make you aware it will be recorded. We will make it available for folks to look at once I get it together. We'll send out a link, or we'll make it make people aware of how they can see the recording. I know there's a lot of excitement about hearing Cherry tonight, so there are people that would, I'm sure, like to see it. And it's good to see so many people here. I think we have we have 38 people on the group tonight, and I'm sure some more will be coming in from all over the place. It's really great. So let me go ahead and introduce Cherry. I think the plan is to go for about an hour with Cherry, and I don't know, we can talk about this, whether Cherry wants to accept questions during her presentation or whether she would like to wait till the end. Can leave that up to Cherry. I know that for many of you, you are anticipating this to just be a 90-minute meeting. So at 8:30, those that need to leave, we understand. If Cherry's able to stay on, or if we want to continue the discussion past 8:30, those who would like to are welcome to stay on past 8:30 tonight. But it's very exciting. I know it's so good to see Hoda on here tonight, because I know it was really with Hoda that I first met Cherry, and we worked together on the Southern Regional Race Unity Committee. And I don't even know how many years ago. It was 20 some years ago when we worked together on projects dealing with race with Baha'i communities all throughout 16 states in the South. So let me tell you a little bit about Cherry. Cherry is the co-executive director and co-founder of the Center for the Healing of Racism in Houston. She co-authored Dialogue Racism, which is an amazing seminar that examines the history and sociological phenomenon of racism in the United States. She's an author. Bread is a simple food, teaching children about cultures. She has conducted workshops and delegations from South and Central America, Africa, South Asia, Europe, guest of the State Department, interested in learning, anyone listening or interested in learning about American racism. The Center for the Healing of Racism has been around, I don't know how many years, but it's been probably 30 or more years that the center's been there. And it's been just a lighthouse, a beacon for the work of racism. And, you know, in recent years, this recent year, there's been an upsurge in awareness of racism, but Cherry has never let go of the importance of discussing race. She's always been on it. She's never been off duty. She's always been on duty. And that's one of the amazing, beautiful things that I appreciate about Cherry and the work that she does. And Cherry, we never talked about what you might discuss tonight, but that's really up to you. There have been a lot of things going on in the United States in recent days, in the last week or so, that all deal with race. That it's up to you what topics you might want to cover tonight. So I'd like to welcome Cherry Steinwender to Common Threads.
Good evening, everyone. It is my greatest pleasure to be with you tonight. And for me, it seems a little like homecoming week because there are people here that I have been connected to for years. Max Locker, his father was around when I first became a Baha'i. And I'll never forget the wonderful gift that he gave to me. When we first started all of this, Nancy Murphy was coming to Dialogue Racism in 1989. I am also looking at Holder, Florida. Fort Lauderdale was the first city that we took Dialogue Racism to out of the state of Texas. And it was very interesting working with Barbara Hacker at that time. She said, well, Cherry, it's a 16-week, 18-week thing. How are we going to do it in 2 days? So I explained it to her. You see, because my thing is, you get it done. You figure out a way to get it done and you do what you have to do. If you could do it in 16 hours, we could do it in 2 full days. And I had to tell her how we're going to do that. Barbara Hacker, let me say, is one of those great spiritual warriors that's homebound now due to MS. Barbara Hacker, when we went to Florida, one of the things that I always did in the mornings, I would, really start singing, "Ye are the stars in the heaven of understanding, the breeze that stirreth at the break of day." And I would just chant in order to prepare and center myself. And we were sitting around Hoda's swimming pool. And I looked at Barbara and I said to her, I want to thank you for allowing me to present Dialogue Racism, to show up authentically the way and who I really am. And she looked at me and she didn't understand that. So what I was trying to convey to her, because all too often white people are always trying to tell us how to do things. And I wanted to acknowledge that I wanted to thank her, because if I couldn't do it my way, I couldn't do it at all. And she bust out laughing. She said, Cherry, as if anybody could tell you what to do. But you see, Charles Bullock, we go way back. I don't know, we've never really had a personal connection, but we were connected through Jesse that lived in Nashville, Tennessee, that married the guy from Flint, Michigan, moved to Houston, Texas, died in Houston, Texas, and was buried in Houston, Texas. So with all of that history and all of these people, I must say again, it feels like a homecoming. And I am so honored that you're taking the time out to be here tonight. Let me start off. I want to start off, and you could explain this to other people later, but that's something I will never, ever forget. I knew and I welcomed reading in Gleanings, where it said, when you meet the downtrodden and the base, help them to recall the woes that they have suffered in the path of God. To me, Baha'u'llah was very clear that racism is a big woe in this country. And so we set out on a journey to help people recall the woes that they have suffered in the path of God. And it's very interesting. There's a woman on this call tonight, Jackie Cohn Newberry. Raise your hands, wave at the people, Jackie, front and center. Jackie Cohn Newberry really was the person responsible for setting me on this journey. Jackie and I have a long history, over 40 years. My history in the Baha'i faith is about 55 years. I've been a Baha'i in Houston, Texas. I've seen this community go from 17 active members to the large community that it is now. But let me tell you what Jackie did. Jackie and I, we were so close. I helped her raise her 2 boys. We lived together at one time. And in fact, we even lived across the hall from each other. We were neighbors. But she had the audacity to come up to me and say, Cherry, why is it you've never felt safe enough with me to tell me how life really is like for you as a Black woman in this country? Whoa, no, she didn't. It was as if she had taken a dagger and stabbed me in my chest. Because you see, I wanted to pretend. You know, we all good at pretending. You know, we never come out of our childlike state when we're little children. We're doing all this make-believe stuff. A lot of us are good at pretending. I wanted to pretend that life was the same way for me as a Black woman living in the United States as it was for Jackie Cohn Newberry, a white woman. And see, I knew that wasn't true, but she called me on it. And then she followed it up with, well, Cherry, you know, we really need to do something about racism. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do nothing about racism. Been there, done that. But let me go back, because some of you, it was around at this time. The center was born in 1989, 31 plus years ago. Some of you may remember when the Universal House of Justice put out a call that Baha'is need to engage in social economic development programs. So a group of people in Houston, Texas answered that call. I'm not going to name them, but I want you to go back to the book that Nat Rutstein wrote, Healing Racism in America. All of the people that started this, their name is in this book. Nat came to Houston, Texas, and he visited with us. And he loved the name we had for ourselves. And he was trying to find a name because he wanted to do, and he was doing this work. But if you want to know, there is a chapter in the book. It's called Birth of an Institute. And I want you to go back and read Birth of an Institute. I want you to look on the back of that book, and I want you to look at the year the book was written. The center started in 1989. The book was written in 1992. And that's all I'm going to say about the book. But I think that it is very, very, very helpful for me to recall that one of the very first women that sat on the board of directors for the center was Navajo. And she had this saying, she said, in my culture, whenever the arrow is released by the bow into the universe, the arrow must always acknowledge the bow that set it in flight. And so let me say to you, here, this group of people whose names you're going to look up in the book, with Jackie Cohn telling me I need to be working on racism. And I'm telling her, I don't want to do that. I'm too old and I'm too tired. But let me tell you what she said. Jerry Abdul-Baha was old and he was tired too. Now, how could you argue with that? So, yeah, I guess she's right. So even though I'm old and tired, Abdul-Baha was older and tireder. And so I said, okay, I'll sit around the kitchen table with y'all and talk about racism. And that's what we did. We formed a kitchen table group of people that like-minded, that want to really look at racism. We had no intentions of forming a nonprofit organization. That was nowhere in our mind. But as other people began to hear about what we were doing and wanted to hold these and have these conversations, the thing just kept growing. And we had to form a nonprofit organization to keep up with the thing. And I always say the thing was out there, it was in the front. And we're trying like everything to keep up with this thing. One night, 100+ people showed up. And of course, we didn't know what we were doing, but we pretend. You see, didn't I tell you that sometimes we're good at pretending? All of a sudden, we had 100 and some people at one time. And I saw one of those people not too long ago, and I just told him, I said, we didn't know what we was doing. We were just practicing on y'all. It has been a long, magnificent journey. But let me go back to the early beginning when I said this was a social economic project, and it was to work on racism. And through the course of working on racism, there have been very wonderful times. There have been some sad times. But we learned to master all of them. In 1992, we incorporated with the state of Texas. We wrote our own bylaws because the attorney wanted $2,000 that we didn't have. And because this was such a gift, it was our gift to the world. Because it was a gift to the world, it never even dawned on us that you can charge money for what you're doing, because that wasn't in our mind. We were giving the world a gift. But as it kept growing and people started calling, and they would ask questions, how much does it cost for a workshop? Well, we didn't know. We didn't never charge nobody for a workshop. It's just that's how it went. But I want to be very clear here. I want to be very clear that for too long, we tried to escape using the word racism in the broader community, but as well in the Baha'i community. We tried to escape using the word racism. You see, I'm very clear when it's said racism is the most vital and challenging issue. It didn't say race unity is the most vital and challenging issue, but yet and still we are afraid to use that word. So straight up, I'm going to call it what it is. And because we have been too afraid to use that word, we have allowed organizations, institutions nationwide to feed people a lot of crap under multiculturalism when you knew it was racism all the time. And then something else happened. This country could no longer wear that mask, hiding, using words. And rather than using the word racism, we're going to just call it prejudice. Prejudice and racism, they are not the same thing. But yet and still, we want to pretend that they are, and they're not, because prejudice seemed like a cute little word. But when George Floyd was lynched right in front of our eyes, and I want to use the word lynch, because what happens to the body with the rope around your neck when you're dangling from a tree is almost the same thing that happened when you have a foot on your neck, cutting off your airways and everything else for almost 9 minutes. And you see, we were sitting in our homes, maybe in our workplace, watching this. And once you see it, you can't pretend that you didn't see it. We saw it. It launched the greatest marches and protests within the United States. But then it wasn't just the United States. It went out all across the world. And now, instead of Googling multiculturalism and diversity training, organizations are actually Googling the word racism. They are looking for organizations that's working on racism. Because see, they can no longer call it multiculturalism, which propelled the center into the highest level the center has ever been in. This to date is January the 15th, midway between the first month. We already have 50 workshops on the calendar already by Zoom. Yes. Since COVID happened last year, we really started out with the very first workshop in Georgia because of the murder of Aubrey. And I called that workshop Running with Aubrey, a history of Black men in this country. We did 2 of them for them. And after George Floyd, 3, I Can't Breathe, because there was so many people registering. We couldn't handle that many on one feed. So we had to do I Can't Breathe 3 times. From there, we have created, since I will not do Dialogue Racism on Zoom, that big program that's 18 hours, I won't do that on Zoom. But I found a way to put together a series of 3 workshops, each one being 2 hours, for business and organizations that's contacting the center for all of these workshops. So I want to go and just look at some of the things that you are very familiar with. And that is when you meet the downtrodden in the base. But there's another thing. Before we started this, we deepened ourselves and we went deep into the writings to be able to make sense and understand what's going on. And one of the things the Universal House of Justice said in one of its letters is that before you take up this banner, you have to purge yourself of every defilement. What does purge mean? What does purge mean? I mean, cleansing out, get it out. So you see, we had to do that before we picked up this banner. For some people, it's very interesting. I hear this all the time that, we're going to go out and fix people. I hear that a lot in the dating scene. Oh, boy meets girl, a girl meet girl, a boy meet boy. And there's a little attraction there. But there's some things there that you're not attracted to and you don't like too much. And so you automatically go, well, don't worry, I'm going to fix him. I'm going to change him. I'm going to change him. And doggone well, you don't have that ability nor that power. That's the reason in the guidelines for sharing that we created to hold these conversations. We can only change ourselves. Our change and growth, however, may inspire somebody else to change. So stop deceiving yourself that you can go around changing people. The other part of that is, if you be the very best that you can be, who you are as you walk through life will inspire other people. So that's what I want to do. I want to work on myself. So out of that set of 3, the first one we will offer to organizations, educational institutions, and corporate America is a look at our racial conditioning. Without exception, we've all been conditioned around race in this country. There are no exceptions. And in this conditioning, it goes so far back and it comes up and shows up in so many different ways. And the very next in that series of 3 is, do you really want to talk about racism? Oh yeah, we want to play around the edges of it, but do you want to go get deep and dirty and really deal with racism? So I asked them the question, really, do you really want to talk about racism? Because I'm not here to, to make you feel good. I'm not even here to, to make myself look good. I want to look real. I can look good too, but I want to look real. So the bottom line is, do you really want to talk about racism? And the last one is bending long years of customs and habits, because we get into habits all the time. And if you don't believe me, whenever you can go back to physical spaces and you're having workshops every week or every month or whatever, I want you to notice where people are sitting. Pay close attention to people that come back repeatedly. They will go and sit in the same seat, and nobody assigned that seat to them, but we are creatures of habit. You know, it's very interesting to me how you pick up things. For an example, if your parents were in the military and you traveled a lot, why is that the first thing out of your mouth when you introduce yourself that you're a military brat? You may not have been bratty at all, but you just constantly repeating things over and over and over again. So I'm gonna back it up and go back again. So we started on this journey. And really, the journey is about looking at the way we have been conditioned and to be real about that. When I am in a workshop and it's a lot of white males, I will walk into the workshop and I really tell them, you know, if I piss you off in the workshop, I'm not apologizing for that. Because I understand if I feed you fluff all day long, that's all you're going to get, fluff in and fluff out. But if I piss you off, maybe it will force you to move into the arena of action. Because you see, that's where I want you. I want you to show up and I want you to take action to make this world better and to do something about this racism in this country. To be able to have white men say, oh, but I don't have any privilege. I worked hard for everything that I got and I studied hard. I say, yes, and all of those things should be rewarded. But there is something that you get in this country just by being white that people of color don't get. And that has to be truly understood. There is something within this country. I grew up in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Because of Louisiana's history of so many French men that would take Black women, set them up in a house, and they could own slaves. That these women would take their children, their girl children, the pretty ones, to the quadroon ballroom where they would be introduced to the aristocrat men that came there to get a Black woman. But you see, it's very interesting. The women that they were breeding, she could have some African features, not too many. So her skin was lighter than mine, totally different. But the bottom line in Lake Charles, Louisiana, I grew up with a lot of white looking colored Negro people. And if white privilege wasn't a real thing, why did so many of them with Black and Negro on their birth certificate move up north to pass for white? Distant themselves from everything that was familiar to them to tap into the whiteness and the value of being white. Yeah. So you can't tell me that white privilege doesn't exist when I'm seeing it all the time. I just came across, somebody told me about a man, I think he was in New York, and this man was highly educated. He worked for this institution for 20 years. I think he may have been a doctor. After 20 years, they found out that he was Black. Now, he was white enough to be white on the job for 20 years, right? But now they found out that he had what? One drop of Black blood? That man was fired and he lost almost everything. There is a value of white skin. So don't let no, so hey, no, stop pretending. You remember I told you how we pretend all the time? So stop pretending. It's real. But it does not take away from people that work hard and people that study hard. There was a young man when all of this was, when we were giving birth to all of this. He was Mayan. He was indigenous from Belize. He was part of the Mayan tribe. And he came to Houston, Texas, and he lived with my husband and I. And we would have these heart-to-heart talks all the time. And when he first came, oh my God, he was the most assimilated model I've ever seen. He looked like he just stepped out the military with the butch haircut, necktie choking the death out of him, three-piece suit, everything. After he was with me for a while, he let his hair grow long. He abandoned those suits. And he doggone sure got rid of that necktie, and he started wearing a medicine bag around his neck. And he and I would lay down on the floor in heart to heart all the time. And he said, Cherry, my grandfather would take me crabbing all the time. And he said to me, you see all those crabs in that bucket? He said, I never have to put a lid on on that bucket. I want you to watch. The moment one of them go forward, the other one will pull him down. And he said, for people of color, that's what we do to each other all the time. We shame each other for not being white enough. We set each other up for failure. And you see, the bottom line is that wasn't our fault. That's not something that we did so much that it was done to us. I think Malcolm X said it very well when he said, we were trained as Black people to hate ourselves from the top of our head to the bottom of our feet. That's a real thing. And at the same time, I think Joy, in her lecture in her book, Post-Traumatic Stress, Post-Slavery, where she said she understood that phenomenon about how Blacks are in the bottom stuck. That's the term for it, the bottom stuck. They're never coming out that bucket. And so for you to leave the neighborhood, I'm doing everything I can to pull you down and to keep you with me. Because see, I don't mind you doing good, but I want you to do good right here. You stay right here and do good with me right here. But you see, once you get the good education and all that, you're gonna leave me. And I don't want you to leave. And that's something that's very, very, very hard. And so to be able to know, I have said this repeatedly, because in the Baha'i faith, they said that we were all created noble. And I love for people to be able to hear that. Do you know each and every one of you were created noble? You know, how many times do people say that to you, that you were created noble? And so I walk through life. I am a very noble creature. I didn't become a Baha'i 50 some years ago to be abased. I consider myself a very noble person. The last thing that I will say, and this is your format, and so I want to respect how you want to handle it. So if you want to have questions and everything else of me, I'd be glad to entertain those. But 10 years of doing this work with nothing but adults, I realized we need to get a younger audience. And so when I say a lot of things, I don't know what I'm talking about. So don't believe that I said. But I'm sleeping, and it kept bothering me and it kept waking me up. We need to teach children at a younger age. So how do you teach children such a harsh lesson? And all of a sudden I realized all cultures eat bread, and it really doesn't matter what country you're from. And when I conceived that in my mind at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's where I get a lot of thoughts. And I went out on a journey to look for this bread. It takes 3 hours in Houston, Texas for me to shop for all of those breads. But luckily, because we are the most diverse city in this country, I could find all of those breads. And then I had to do a lot of research and find out that breads have histories and stories and all these beautiful things. So when I enter a classroom full of kids with this big, big basket full of bread, and to be able to connect children to our common humanity using bread. So from there, I developed another workshop for high school students. And the way I developed this, I'm sleeping, I have 150 students that's waiting for me at an alternative school. And all of those students were Black and brown, and they were all girls, and they were there because they were either pregnant or they'd already had children. And so I'm wondering, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for these young women? And all of a sudden, I just start singing, Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. And I'm going, Cherry, you can't bring eggs into the classroom and start cracking eggs all over everywhere. But I stayed with that Humpty Dumpty. I was to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning to open this workshop, and here it is, 6 o'clock in the morning. I put it all together, and I decided, why don't you use paper plates? And so I went out and bought paper plates, put all the workshop together in my mind, and showed up at the school. The lesson is this racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia is hurting all of us. It's shattering all of us, some more than others, but we are still shattered. We are broken, just like shattering the paper plate, shattering or breaking the eggs. It's not impossible to put us back together again, but it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of effort. So I created a whole workshop around Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. From there, we have been able to do that workshop many times over years for many different high school kids. And I remember one of the workers for the city of Houston saw me do it for high school kids and wanted it done for adults. So when someone called up the office and they have a workshop they're inquiring about, and if we don't have it, I just said, when do you need it? Because if we don't have one to meet your needs, we'll create it. So I will say this, that it's a painful subject, because I was doing one today for Long Star College, and sometimes it's hard to get people to open up, but I just say straight up, if you think I came here to make y'all feel good, you're mistaken. That's not what my purpose is. See, that's the problem. We have made too many people just feel good, and they stuck in that feel good mentality. And it's hard for them to enter into real conversations around things that really matter. And I'm talking about racism. That's what I'm talking about. And lastly, to give you a chance to ask questions or comments or whatever have you. We are very educated that we are not supposed to confess, because confession only leads to abasement. And God never wanted any of his children to be abased. Well, we wrote to the Universal House of Justice and we inquired about what we were doing. And the Universal House of Justice answered clearly. What we are doing in dialogue racism, getting people to recount the woes that they have suffered in the path of God, is no way at all considered confession, because confession is meant to absolve people of their sins. And we're not absolving nobody of their sins. Even what happens in AA meetings and meetings like that, that is not considered by the house as confession. So I just want to let you know, for some of you, I hope that I freed you from that whole thing about what confession is and what it isn't. So when Baha'u'llah said, I have created you noble, why dost thou abase yourself? Why do you abase yourself? It's been a long, wonderful journey. And it's been wonderful to be able, here I am all across the world doing this type of work with people that are not Baha'is, with very little connection to the Baha'i community, because sometimes it's too hard when you're being real. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Cherry. Thank you very much for that presentation. We can go into questions and comments. I wanted to ask Yassine maybe first if he wanted to lead with a question, if you had one on your mind that, as co-facilitator to start?
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing your stories. That was insightful, and as a teacher, and then as a teacher of teachers, I really relate to many of the points you have made. Um, I connected very early with your idea of the mask of multiculturalism, because I do teach classes on racism and the role of teachers in addressing it. And one of the things I do have to teach is that the answer to racism is not multiculturalism. That these words, such as diversity, are sort of a way to make white folks feel good about what they're doing, right? Because it keeps them comfortable by not naming what the issue is. So I feel integrated in the work I'm doing, and that was a great connection I found between what we both do. So, but thank you again for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yassine. And I don't want to steer things in any way, but in the last week in the United States, we've been going through a lot of turmoil around racism, and particularly a focus on what's happening with white men and the violence that we saw at the Capitol. And I don't know if without delving deep into politics, if there's anything you wanted to say about that as we launch into other people wanting to ask questions and make comments.
Well, you know, I did an interview Wednesday night for the Houston Chronicle, yesterday for KPFT Radio. And it's a way that you can talk, that you don't have to go straight in and saying Republic or Democrat, okay? But what I said is, what happened in the United States on January the 6th, before I could even tap into how horrible an act this was, regardless of what you want to call it, the first thing I had to take a breath and say, thank God they wasn't Black. Now that's exactly what happened. And to be able to know that if it had have been any of those Black Lives people that stormed that Capitol, we would have had a bloodbath in this country, almost like that of the Civil War in this country. The other thing I really had to sit with, and in the interview that I did on the radio yesterday, I looked at our history in this country as Black people. The lynchings, the rapes on Black women. I mean, the whole, everything. And never was there a time in this country that we ever did anything like we saw the other day. But at the same time, we are even what is happening to Black men, unarmed by police officers, we still have not done anything like what we saw January the 6th, but yet and still, the negative stereotypes about Black men in particular, but about Black and brown people, those stereotypes are real for them. And then they make us seem like we're the dangerous ones. So you see that? It was a wake-up call. It was really a wake-up call. But for me to first say, take a deep breath, Cherry, and thank God they're not Black. A lot of
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So we'd like to open it up now. If you want to use the raise hand function, I think, which is usually, where is that, under participants? I'm trying to think of where it is.
Just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, okay. Just go ahead, whoever's, or a comment, if you got anything, just jump in. It's some quiet folks here, Cherry. Oh, I think Kathy has her hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Cherry. It's been years. It's good to see you. You know, I wanna piggyback on your last comment that thank God it wasn't Black people who stormed the Capitol building. And in another way, I'm thinking, thank God it was white people, so that our country could really see the state of white supremacy in its bald, naked presence.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess I have a question then, because it was last week that this happened. And I wanted to know if any organization or businesses had contacted you in light of what had happened, for some kind of training or insights, anything like that.
Not yet. Not yet. But let me say, and I repeat because I said it earlier, we have 50 some workshops on the calendar right now. And all of those workshops that we have on the calendar now is a direct result of George Floyd's murder. And the thing too is that because this is something totally different, these are all white people that went and did this, okay? That's something different. So I'm waiting for the next conversation.
Hoda has her hand up. Go ahead, Hoda.
It is so good to see your beautiful, radiant smile, and you haven't changed a bit, Cherry. I love you so dearly, and the impact that you had when I first came to this country as an immigrant, and how you helped me see things has been life-changing, and I'm forever going to be grateful for your power of utterance and your power of persuasion, and to be real and to be authentic, to be the key, just to be able to look at yourself, look at your flaws. My question is, and you did mention that it has been hard to address this in the Baha'i community. And in the Baha'i community, there's a large number of immigrants, Iranians, first generation Iranians, and subsequently those who have left since the 1979 revolution, who now comprise over 60% of the numbers of Baha'is in the United States. You mentioned just the term you used, Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. I want to know, what is this wall? You've worked with immigrants. I'm sure you have developed some skills in being able to move immigrants that come to the United States from not falling in the pattern of drinking the beverage of white supremacy and just being happy with it and turning back to the very reason they came here. What do you have? What can you impart? What are skills, abilities, language, your experience that can help move more of my Iranian brothers and sisters to become engaged and in the struggle for promoting racial justice?
You know, Hoda, it's very interesting. I think Nat Rutstein covered that very well in his book, To Be One. He said, we came here, we were Russian Jews that was escaping oppression. And you have left everything behind and you want to make it in the new home. And you look around and you figure out right away who's making it. And if you can be made to identify Russian Jews, now if you can be made to identify with whiteness, then you are you part of the in group. But what happens when you in the in group is that you have to dump on everybody that the in group is dumping on. So all of these different people of color, you have to dump on them because see, you want to still be a part of the in group, right? And you want to make it. Remember, you've left everything behind and you in this new country. So let me say, in 1992, in the American Baha'i little newspaper that wasn't as fancy and everything as we're getting now, I'll never forget there was an article and it was written by an Iranian. And the article said, we are not white and we are not Black, but we have a duty and a responsibility in our new adopted home according to our faith that we should be moving into communities of people of color. But you see, at that time, the United States had not given Iranians the classification of whiteness. You see, all these different people, immigrants coming to the United States, they have to wait their turn to be white. You see, when the Irish first came to the United States, they were not white. In fact, if you close your eyes and they say a lot of the negative stereotypes about Irish and you don't see them, then automatically your mind may go to, oh, they're talking about Black people. But you see, the Irish didn't come here white, nor did the Italians. One of the reasons for them having all of these gangster mentality and doing all this crime and bootlegging and everything else was because there was no way for them to make it in this country because they wasn't white yet. And so we look at this thing now, and it's very interesting to me, people of Latin countries, how on these farms, you have to check Latin, but not white. Latin, you see, so the thing of it is the country is making a distinction between white Latins and darker Latins. The other part too is when in 1992, when that article was written by an Iranian Baha'i, you had not yet got the classification of whiteness. And this country is in the business. All you have to do, let me look at who's on this class. You see, you give me the power, and this is the power of the pen. All I have to do is sign something, and I can make any one of you white that I want to, if I feel you're a good fit for this country. But at the same time, I could give it to you, but I can take it away from you too. Because when they gave it to the people from India, they gave them the classification of whiteness, and they took it away from them too. So this, for a lot of people, it's called white by law. See, because of a law, I've made you white. But at the same time, in this series that was used highly all across the United States in universities called Race, the Power of Illusion, it's very interesting that the Supreme Court in the 20s said that people from India, you may be Caucasian, but you're not white, you see. So you may be this, but you're not white. And then the most stupidest thing that have nothing to do with science, they said, white is what the common white man on the street say white is. So if the common white man on the street say you're not white, well, hell, you're not white.
We have two people with their hands up. Thank you for that, Cherry. First Jeff and then Charles.
Hi, Cherry.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi. I want to thank you for your talk, and I definitely learned some new things, and especially for working with kids, and just hearing your creative ideas kind of gets the juices flowing for me for thinking outside the box for how to talk about some of the most important topics, racism, but other topics as well, and how to teach, spirituality and justice and all these important things. My question is not really related to that though, but I guess I was curious as to what the name of your program is, the 18-hour thing that you were mentioning. And I guess I want to combine that with my question, which is, what would you recommend, either your program or other programs, or maybe a book or two, for people who really don't even know much about racism and their eyes haven't really been opened yet at all, or for white people who just they don't think white privilege exists, and kind of to foster some people in the right direction, whether it be inviting them to some type of workshop or even just a book that they could read.
The first thing that I will say, and this is the funny Cherry now, you direct them, don't direct them to another book, because hell, every time something bad happens in this country, white people pick up a book. So I'm not gonna direct them to no books. I'm gonna direct them, you direct them to other white people that's woke. Let other white people educate them. You direct them to people that they will listen to. But we spend a lot of energy trying to convince people, and I know what I'm talking about, because when Obama was put into office, the media went on a field day frenzy with these headlines. No more racism in the United States. We're in a post-racial America. Well, what that did, that made my work harder. I had to work harder. I had to work harder. Because you see what it did, it gave white people a pass. Well, see, we don't have to do anything on racism because it's no more racism. I know at the time we had a gay lesbian mayor that was married. At the time, it wasn't legal to another white woman. But the bottom line is it didn't overcome homophobia just because we had a white, lesbian mayor. So you see how crazy we can make ourselves. I think so often our conversation educate us into ignorance, but to be real, Jeff, what I would really recommend for everybody, I'm gonna really be real now. And you could get it on YouTube, you can Google it, and the whole 3-part series is online. See, I had to pay $400 for the DVD when I bought it. So you could go online. It's called Race, the Power of an Illusion. And it made me realize when I watched the first part, there's a lot of, biology and everything in the first part. But the second part is called The Stories We Tell. And so whenever I'm facilitating, I started off saying, once upon a time, America told a story. And this story was told for for 3 reasons. In order to hold on to power, in order to be able to get land, and for free labor. That's what part 2 was about. But in that part 2, it made me realize, this thing was about slavery, and it wasn't about slavery. It was about not being a full human being in this country, that I was labeled as subhuman. I wasn't even a full human being. The third part deal with how, the name of it is The House We Live In. And it takes you through that whole thing about the history of redlining in this country. You see, we use the word redlining. I used the word redlining, and I never even understood what redlining was till I really watched that series. And so now, because of that one law, redlining, that most of white people hold the majority of their wealth in the homes that they own. And these homes can be used to borrow money against, to send your children to universities. If you get sick, you got that saving bank right there, you're living in it. You can take holidays and everything else. But people that have been kept out of the lending institutions to buy homes, they don't have that saving bank. And if they do, those houses most of the time are not worth anything. I really feel that would be something good for y'all to look at as a group and really talk about that. And one of the young educators said, and the way out of racism is in racism. You want to come out, you got to dive in.
Thank you. I've heard of that series, but it's been shown here locally at a Sunday devotional, but only part 1. And it wasn't mentioned there were other parts.
Oh, So you have to see.
Great.
And then in that second part, it showed how the Native Americans, what they really did to the Native Americans, because as more Europeans came to this country, they needed more land. So when you're talking about pushing people off of their land, and then when the United States wanted even more land, went to the Philippines. And then when they wanted more land, they went south. And all of this stuff that was happening. You see, this is one of the most important histories is in that 3-part. And I think you should see part 2 and part 3.
Thank you. I think Jennifer just put the link in the chat for anyone, the YouTube link. So if you want to take a look at the film, find those 3 parts, take a look at that link. I see that Charles had his hand up, but he took his hand down. Charles?
Hi, Charles.
Hi. Thank you so much, Sherry. It's so nice to see you. I just had a question. I have a question. Well, in light of all the things that are happening now, at least there's so much focus on them. I know they've been there all along, but still now they're to a whole new height. And I was wondering if, I mean, we all have a role to do, a role to play. We all have things that we have to do. And some of those are distinctive in some ways. It all depends upon, you know, what we have to offer. And I was just wondering if you had any suggestions of everyday practices for Black people to remain or to strive to be uplifted, to not be discouraged, to recognize that there is work to do and not be overcome with the weight of all that we are currently facing.
You know, that's something very, very interesting to ponder, because right now, under this organization, Center for the Healing of Racism, we are now educating the third generation. When we first started, we had the baby boomers, and then their children came to age and got married and have children. Someone called me the other day about a project they want to put in their school. And she said, my grandfather and grandmother went through your courses. So I knew she's the third generation, but I see this all the time. Our young people have lost all hope. What is it, the conversation that we have to give our young people of color hope? What is going on right now is further distancing themselves from that connection to hope, because of all the negative things that they see about who we are. I love being with people, especially of African descent, and to be able to let them know who they really are. Because when we were taken out of Africa, they took the best. They took the creme de la creme out of Africa. They didn't take the weak, the sickly, or the frail. They took the very best. And I'll never forget a conversation that Bishop Tutu and the late John Hope Franklin had, these two men. And Bishop Tutu asked John Hope Franklin, well, do y'all talk about slavery in your country? John Hope Franklin said, we have complicated our situation almost to a post of hopelessness by our refusal to talk about it. You see, we are having conversations with our Black men in particular, how to keep them safe so that they could come home alive. But there are other conversations. They need to know about a history that has never been taught to us in those books. They need to know that. But at the other hand, what we need to do also is to teach Black and brown kids about the contributions of white people that have always been there, regardless of what the oppression was called at the time it was called. You have to give them a complete education. You have to redirect them now toward hope. You have to redirect them because we're losing them. They're losing hope. And we don't know, a person with no hope, we don't know what, anybody could tell them to do anything. It was in St. Petersburg, Florida. I went there to do a workshop right after, in 1994, I think it was, right after a young Black man was murdered by the police. And it caused them to start burning down St. Petersburg. Well, anyway, I'm saying that to say, I'm gonna tell you about what you can do with young people, how young people are. So here was this man, he was ex-military, and all these young men would gather around him, and he was feeding and peddling hate and revenge. So here all of these young people, and now here it hits the newspaper that here I'm coming to talk about racism. So they were gonna come and disrupt the whole process. It was at one of the city municipal buildings or something. But when I stood up there and out and being real, and I'm telling it the way it is, they didn't say a word. I didn't even know they were there because they warned me. what was going to happen. I said, well, if they show up and become disruptive, I'm going to just give them the mic, because you see, I know they want to be heard. So if they start acting up, I'm going to give them the mic. It wasn't until I got back to Houston, said, Cherry, 3 of them was there, and they went and reported back to the leader that all of them should have been there. You should have heard what she said. You see, this lopsided history we've been feeding people in this country, no exception. We have to lead our young people back to hope. And I feel that hope is the conversations about really letting them know who they are. Do you know how that made me feel to say, gee whiz, they took the best and the brightest, the best and the brightest. And then to know that in Africa, they said children as young as 3rd grade, they know what happened, because every part of their education is telling them about what happened. And all of their arts and dramatizations and everything else is steeped into what happened about the ones that were stolen. Do we do that? No, we try not to talk about slavery in every way possible. And then when we bring it up among a lot of white people, the first question out of their mouth, or first comment, well, you never would have been enslaved if it wasn't for other Black people helping. You see, yeah.
I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherry. I see Mark has his hand up. You have a question, Mark?
I had more of a comment. Jeff, are you still here?
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. You had brought up the point of, okay, how do I get people to understand that they have privilege when they don't want to acknowledge it? And you were asking for a resource. Here's an idea. How about make yourself the resource? If you have even a somewhat vague understanding of what it is to be a white man in this country, I'm sure you can probably give people real world examples of how privilege has affected your own life. I have 2 particularly good anecdotes from my own life, in both involving encounters with the police. One of which I would have surely probably been arrested, or not probably, would have been arrested had I been a dark-skinned man. One I would have been shot had I been a dark-skinned man. And I'm not going to go into the details, but the first one can actually be related to people in a somewhat humorous way. It starts out as one of those one-time in college stories. And I can tell it in a way that makes people laugh. And then when I get to the end of the story, I can say, well, you know, the only reason I got away with that is because I'm white. So just try that technique sometime. It's worked for me.
Thank you.
Thanks
for sharing.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing that.
I did not reveal where that last name Steinwender come from. I'm married to a white, blonde, blue-eyed man, and he cannot be mistaken from anything other than Aryan. We've been together. Next month will be 39 years of marriage. I brought my husband to the hood, the only white man living in the hood. Being in this house in the hood, remember, I've had, I'm sure, without mistake, at least 200 white people come and stay at this house in the hood. Chuck stayed in the hood with us. Hoda stayed in the hood with us. Nancy, and she's been to the hood. And I'm bringing this up because my husband will look at you and say to you, I'm not an American. My husband have a green card. But my husband says very clearly, my wife and I live in 2 different Americas. And he could say and put on the table all of these things. But our foundation is healing racism, not combating racism, fighting racism, dismantling racism. It's about healing racism. And in that healing, the reason we chose that name, because in those little early kitchen table conversations, it became very apparent that we have all been hurt around racism. It really doesn't matter how white your skin is, how different shades of brown, we've all been hurt around racism. And I want to just tell you how my husband has been hurt around racism. My husband will have other white men come up to him and dump all of their racial garbage on him, not knowing who he's married to, and automatically assume, well, you see, you're in my camp, so I can sell these things to you, you know, because we're in the same camp. The last event I remembered was during a workshop, and my husband was in the workshop, and I said, I could tell you how my husband has been hurt around racism. And he may not even totally be aware of it. But every time my husband talked about a friend on the job, every time, let me tell you, it's a person of color. My husband did not gravitate. He stopped gravitating to whites. And when I said that in the workshop, it became real to him and he just broke down and started crying. And I'm gonna tell you exactly what he said. The reason he don't want to be around white people because he don't want to hear that crap, but he used another word, okay? My husband came here from Austria. And now my husband, he don't have no white friends. That's a hurt. And maybe that's another conversation. And I used it at one time with a workshop for Baha'is, mostly Baha'is, in Boston. I asked the white people in the room to tell me how you have been hurt. And maybe that's a conversation you need to have too. And see, that's a conversation that's hard for white people. That's why I did it, because it's hard. How have you been hurt around racism? And you may have to pull some of your teeth out to get there, but stick with it, you'll get there.
That's a great question. It really is. Jackie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. Jerry, like Cherry said, she and I go way back because when I made the phone call in Houston to learn about the Baha'i faith, she was the one that answered the phone. So I consider her my spiritual mother and my sister. One of the things that Mark was talking about, suggesting to Jeff, is something that a good friend of Cherry's, Tim Wise, always talks about, is how when he was in college or he was in school, he did a lot of things that the police would be willing to go after him for, especially using drugs. And he said he got away with so much stuff that if he was Black, he would never get away with it. And I can heartily recommend all of the books that Tim Wise has written. He's been to Houston several times to receive the center's Ally Award. He's a good friend of the center. So if you want to get started, that is a great one to recommend to people to really start looking inside of themselves.
I called him my white boy. And when we together, that's how I address him, my white boy. And see, that's another thing too, is to be able to do research on white people that was clear thinking, that stood up against oppression. So I've been doing that too and making workshops. In fact, there's a workshop I will be doing for an all-white Lutheran church. And so a lot of these churches, they want these workshops because they want to understand what their behavior, what they are doing that's causing the revolving door thing where people of color in, people of color out, people of color in, people of color out. So to be able, and I've worked with so many faith communities, even when as far as Boston, I did 6 workshops in Boston for International Meditation Society for their board of directors as well as their staff. So
Sherry, it's just 8:30 now, and I know some people had just planned on being here for an hour and a half. So we probably just need to formally allow people to leave if they have to. Sherry, are you able to stay a little longer if there are any more questions?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Okay. So we can formally thank Sherry just at this point. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's awesome. And if anyone needs to leave, you are welcome to at this point or stay around for a little while longer. I see Nancy has her hand up.
I do, Chuck. I have this little book here that I wanted to bring to the attention of some folks that is written by Cherry. She talked about using the bread with the children, and she neglected to say that she put that into a little book. And I happen to be privileged enough to have a copy of that. So I just wanted to share that. For those who are looking for a way to talk about racism and race unity or whatever for children, that this is a very good example of bringing them together.
Thank you, Nancy. And because of COVID, we are no longer able to go into the schools. So I commissioned a film company that actually made the whole film, and where I will be able to use it by Zoom for the classrooms. So that's a really good thing, and it's beautiful. The film is beautiful, and because we got a large contribution from our company, and so I am committed to doing 30 schools, of bringing programs to 30 schools because of that grant. And so that's who funded this film production. Yeah. But the book itself, when the author, the publishing company asked me, how should they illustrate the children? And I gave them the physical descriptions of the children, and I wanted them to know I'm not making up descriptions. I'm not stereotyping these children. This is what they look like, because all of the children in that book are part of my personal life. The young man in the book from India, however, he is a medical doctor in Long Beach, California now. He's not a little boy, but everybody in the book, and I even have my husband in the book as a little boy. So they said, how should we illustrate the teacher? I said, make me 35, short afro and fine. So if you look at the cover of the book again, short afro, 35 years old and fine.
Cherry, could you tell him what you do as an example when you take the bread into the classroom and where you get all those breads? What kinds of breads you have?
Well, in order to be able to take children's mind globally, to be able to see breads they've never seen before. For an example, injera, eaten a lot in Ethiopia and Eritrea, and of course that's in the book. And the way that it even looked, most children have never seen that bread. And so when you're shopping for the bread, Jerusalem market, the Jerusalem Halal market, where I get most of the breads from the Middle East. But I also go to a Lebanese restaurant to get mountain bread that I can't find anywhere else. There's also taking the trip to go to the Jewish bakery. And so to go to Chinatown, which is really now called Asian Town, to be able to get some of the buns or the sesame seed buns that people eat in that part of the country. And then I have taken all of the interns from the university on the shopping trip with me, because it gives them a chance to see parts of Houston they have never seen before. So even the grant that I wrote is to be able to take a lot of high school kids on the shopping trip for the bread, to go to the Ethiopian market, and the woman that owns the Ethiopian market speaks 5 languages, and to have her speak those languages to students that I've taken there. So it's a rich experience that a lot of, people in Houston have never had. So that's all that different type of bread from all over the world. Yeah.
Wow. Wonderful. Cherry, I remember you bringing a big bag of fortune cookies
Yeah.
to one of the sessions where you would have everybody open. That you couldn't eat them; they were so old. But you used to, you'd start off as an icebreaker, have people read the messages in the fortune cookies, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
Another
so
kind of bread.
That's what I've often said. If you truly understand the nature of what you're dealing with, you can use almost anything and create a workshop. So we know how people love going to Chinese restaurants, and as soon as they get the fortune cookie, they'll break it open and what did yours say? What did yours say? But this is very interesting for them to read the fortune cookie. But they have to look at, is it anything that is related to them that's in the fortune? So that gives them to talk about themselves. But if you look at the back, a lot of times there's numbers, which is supposed to be lottery numbers. And so those numbers could be used to how many children you have, how this number is how long I've been married. You could come up with all. And I remember one person, the numbers that she had, she could not come up with anything and she really wanted to talk. So she started adding and subtracting the numbers in order to be able to give her voice and they have meaning from the numbers. So there's so many creative things that I've used. And maybe the creativity came along because we did not have a large budget. Remember, we were just a mom and pop organization. And so you have to be creative when you don't have money. And I love that about the poor. Poor people are very creative. We are creative in putting together recipes, eating junk, calling it soul food, and making it taste good, and everybody else want it. When you're poor, you have to be creative.
Yeah. Sherry, I had a question back talking about white people and whiteness. There's a saying that goes that to be a traitor to whiteness is to be loyal to humanity.
I love that. I've heard that one before. I've heard that one before.
And I think the struggle. Go ahead, Cherry.
There is a sign that I've seen so often in the demonstrations that happened last year. And that sign said, silence is violence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Silence is violence. And sometimes I've even had read on the sign, white silence is violence.
Yeah.
So you could create a whole workshop around that.
Mm-hmm.
And what does silence do? When we talk about sexual abuse, child abuse, how we all too often hear that we have to enter into a code of silence, that you can't ever tell anybody what happened to you in your home. And in fact, women have learned more ways to fix makeup on their face to cover up cuts and bruises and everything else. And you see, it's the silence that kept perpetuating it. So when you're talking about silence along the road of racism, that silence equals violence. It allows this thing to continue and to continue and to continue. Yeah. Silence is violence. Another workshop that for little children, those of you that work with little children, because we are exposed to emojis all the time on the computer. There are those little bitty yellow paper plates. And so in order to give children a voice, that I said, how is racism? You could come up with any questions that you want to, but does racism hurt? And if so, just draw an emoji. We did that one day, and we even had adults participate in that. So that way they could have a voice, and they draw an emoji. Does it hurt? Draw a hurt face. Does it make you cry? So it's just so many ways to bring this home. But in the bread basket, it's very beautiful to see all of those breads. So how do you bring the lesson home to little children? So here I get them totally bouncing off the wall. They excited. They want to know what breads come next. And then after all of the bread is given out, then I have to totally change my whole demeanor and I become very sad. And they're looking at this. And as I become sad, and I say to them, but sometimes Miss Cherry want to cry because my heart is hurting because I have been hearing little boys and girls say things that they repeated that big people said. And those things that they are repeating that hurt other little children is I can't play with you because your skin is too dark. I can't play with you because of the shape of your eyes, your lips, your nose. I can't play with you because of your religion. And Miss Cherry knows that you're only repeating what big people are saying. But I want you to use your big person voice. And when you hear another child say that, I want you to say that's wrong because Miss Cherry said all children are good and all children are beautiful. And then I asked them, can you do that for me? And they hanging on to my every word. And they go, yes, Miss Cherry, yes, Miss Cherry. And I said, if you make that promise to me, I will make a promise to you. And there is something, some sadness in this for me, because when I do this, because of some of the schools that Black and brown children attend, that's call them these ragged, infested rat holes, they call schools. Sometimes I have cried while I'm in front of the children. But it's another sad part. When I say to them, Miss Cherry promised, she will continue to open bread baskets so that no little child will ever be hurt. And that some schools, I've been doing this every year for 10 years, repeatedly. So the film is almost ready, just have to add the credits to it, and then it'll be ready to be shown in schools. Yeah.
Wow.
Then I have
Sounds-
to go through that sad part again on the film. Yeah. So
Wow. We want to hear about it when it finally comes out, for sure.
yeah.
I see Diane has her hand up, and I think Hoda had her hand up too.
Thank you, Chuck. And thank you, Cherry. This has been so enlightening. And wow, you've just been blowing my mind with all these ideas. I have one comment and one question. The comment is one analogy that I've been thinking about in my head is the one that Abdul Baha used about chocolates and chocolate candy. And you know, if you Google the health benefits of chocolate, it's really all to do with the brain and the frontal lobe. And dark chocolate in particular helps us make better decisions. It also releases endorphins so that we feel better. And then another benefit is that it's been shown to, in some experiments, help with memory. So, I mean, there are all kinds of health benefits related to chocolate. And I think you could probably do a workshop on that. You being so creative, you know, could put something together like that. So that was just a thought. And then the question I had was, do you have like any branches of the Center for the Healing of Racism in other parts of the country, or are there any plans for that? No? Okay.
Oh, no, we have no branches. However, people have asked all across the United States to come under the center's branch. But that type of energy, just doing all of the work that I'm doing, traveling and doing all these workshops, when you talk about putting branches together, you're also talking about liability insurance. And right now, we carry 3 insurance policies. So we have $1 million policy for the board of directors, and that's also very interesting. Our board of directors, if you go to our website and look at them, the bylaws said when we wrote the bylaws, the board of directors have to be as diverse as possible to represent the ethnic makeup of the city. So we can't just have a board that's all Black or all white. we have to really work hard to make that board diverse. It's not an easy task at all, but I will never, ever have anyone accuse me, well, why you got all Black people on the board? And then I'm gonna go something crazy like, well, we don't know any other people, so, we couldn't find any. Organizations do that all the time, regardless of what is missing or what's not there at all. And so, no, it takes a lot of energy to make a board as diverse as our board. So that's another thing too. So this thing that we created was well thought out, even the guidelines. I don't care if you get sick and tired of hearing the guidelines, if you come every week or whatever, we're gonna still repeat those guidelines and we enforce them. Because as I said often, we're not here to repeat the Jerry Springer show or any of those other crazy shows that's people getting all this sensational yelling and screaming and everything else and doing all that yelling and screaming for ratings. I'm not in the business for ratings. So no, we're gonna hold you to those guidelines.
Hoda, did you want to speak?
Yes, Cherry, another analogy that you used when you came here, and you were my first teacher in doing this healing racism work, which I will never forget 30 years ago. You taught the poison cookie. You said, Hoda, if you believe in the oneness of humanity, and if you have the word now is cognitive dissonance, if you really believe in oneness, but if your behavior and if what you tell your kid is different with the way you behave, then your child will definitely be confused and he'll never respect what you stand for and what you believe in. And that was a very helpful thing, the idea of a poison cookie, for me to make sure that my children did not think that I was kind of confused, that I believed in something, and I would hold myself accountable to that belief. And I wouldn't like say, well, don't go play with that kid, or maybe don't marry that person, or, oh, let's not, let's go kind of in a different safe neighborhood. It was very helpful as a mother of very, very young children then. And I'm very grateful to you for that.
But let's look at that oneness of humankind. The whole writings is set up on the oneness of humankind. And Barbara Hacker was teaching Baha'i Sunday school, and the little children, she was talking about the oneness of humankind. And then one of the little children said, oh yeah, but that's just like kind of, sort of. And so Barbara looked at the child and said, no, it ain't nothing kind of, sort of about it. It is really real. So to go back to what Hoda said, here you're going to try to teach your children about the oneness of humanity, but the way that you do it is kind of, sort of, where your child ain't really believe in that anyway. And then here's the Baha'i class, and the children is telling the teacher, oh, it's not really real, it's kind of, sort of. For me, I don't take the oneness of humanity lightly. And to be able to, what I've said, and I said it before when I was with you guys, that I won't even use the word different races. I don't use it at all, never. I won't cross that line. Because if I truly believe that we are one species, if I truly believe what the writing said, that we are one, how can I really believe that and run around calling everybody different races? The bottom line is you don't really believe it. See, you haven't internalized it. Every email I send out, with the exception of very few, I end with in oneness, because I want to keep that on people's minds. I'm talking about us, one human family. And that's what Jeff was so fascinated about Power of Illusion, because it broke it down to show you how we are all the same, human species. So if you want to do something about oneness, change your language. That I make up words. Hey, I love making up words too. But my husband and I'm not in an interracial marriage. And even when news reporters contact me, they're doing a piece on interracial marriage. I said, I'll never do an interview under that title. You change the name and I'll do it, because see, it's not real. So we have to be bold. When I say that I'm in a marriage with a man that is of different hue than me, from a different culture than me, you know, I'll say anything, but I'm not going to say I'm in an interracial marriage. And if we had children, I would never say I have biracial children. I don't use that language, because the language itself, and when I'm in a university setting, I will say, you are using the language of the oppressor. You are buying into the mentality and the language of the oppressor, because that's who created that different racist theory. And then you buying into it. And in 2021, you still calling each other different races.
Wow. Thank you. I see our friend Evelyn now, her camera's on. Evelyn, did you have a question or wanted to say something?
No, I'm just enjoying the format and loving seeing everybody.
Okay. Well, it's good to see you. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to hold y'all hostage. Chuck, why don't you call for 2 more, then I'll wrap it up.
Okay. All right, then. 2 more and we're wrapping up. 2 more comments or questions. Oh, Kathy, go ahead, Kathy.
Terry, I just want to thank you for being down to earth and being so real and authentic. It's wonderful to see a Baha'i take the beautiful spiritual perspective that the writings offer and apply it in everyday scenarios, making it real. I'm going shopping for bread. We're doing Humpty Dumpty. And as far as I'm concerned, that is what helps to bring people together, because sometimes talking about race makes everybody want to run away. And so I think you have found some wonderful ways to make this appealing and at least to attract people into courageous conversations. So thanks for sharing how you're doing this. And obviously you're in demand, so it's working. And I was in a book, anti-racist book group last night. And one of the members said, you know, we're not doing really great calling people racists. How's that working for us? It's not working so well. We have to find some other ways to attract, especially white people, into these conversations. And so I thank you for sharing a variety of ways to invite people into real conversations. Thanks so much.
One more. I think one more. We have time for one more. Thank you for that, Kathy. Thank you.
Well, Jerry, you've done the same thing continuously and you've done a good job. One of the things that we appreciate is the fact that you use bread and we use the kitchen table. So when you put the bread on the kitchen table and you invite everybody in, we got a party.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, in wrapping up tonight, I want to give you an opportunity. Really, just sit. And I want you to look at all of the faces that's here tonight. I wish all 38 was still here. But as you look at everybody, I want you to say to yourself, and I want you to use your name. And this is what you're going to say. And I'm going to use my name first. I, Cherry, came into this world wanting and desiring connections with all of you. That's who I really am. And if it wasn't because of racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, I probably would have stayed that way. So let's do it quietly together. Look around. Look around at all of the members of your family in their different hues and say to yourself, I, Cherry, came into this world wanting and desiring connections with all human beings.
What a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much, Cherry. Just so much to think about and absorb from what was said and the questions. Thank you all for participating so much in Common Threads. Yassine and I are just really thrilled that to have such a wonderful group here tonight. Cherry, we wish you the very best in the work you're doing. We'll be thinking about you and praying for you in your success in all that you do. And just to let you know that Common Threads will have another meeting. I think we're looking at February 25th would be our next meeting. If you want to put your email in the chat, we'll be sure to let you know when the next meeting will be, and it'll probably just be a pure dialogue next time for our next meeting. That's what we're talking about. But thank you so much for participating. Well, so kind. Cherry, you're wonderful. We love you.
Thank you, Sherry. That was amazing.
Yeah, I too want to thank Sherry and everyone else for sharing your time tonight with us. This was enlightening and heartwarming. I think we all needed some of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck and Yassine. Thank you, Cherry. It was wonderful. Great evening.
Thank you. It was really wonderful.
Good to see you all. Good night. Good night.
I put information in the chat of how to contact the center.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm leaving the building.
And my love to Ziggy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Good to see everybody.
Chuck, thank you guys.
Thank you, Chuck.
You.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Yassine.
You're checking Yassine.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Bart.
Hey, Charles. Glad I could get on in here.
Glad you could
Take
make
care.
it.
Love you guys. Bye.
You too.
Thank you.